I found the deed inside a drawer I was not supposed to open. My name was not on it. My brother's name was in clean block letters, signed and stamped almost 2 years ago. The mortgage I had been paying every month for 6 years was not on a house my parents owned anymore. They had quietly signed it away while I was at work, while I was sending checks, while I was answering every late-night call about the roof, the boiler, the taxes, the leak, the bills. And the next morning, they asked me with calm voices over breakfast if I could please cover the next payment too. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to sit in that chair with me for one moment. If you opened a drawer in your own parents' house and found proof that the family you trusted had built a future for someone else with your money, would you confront them right there at the table? Would you walk out and never come back, or would you stay quiet and let the truth find its own way home? Take a second and decide what kind of woman you would be in that kitchen, because the answer you choose says more about you than anything I can tell you about myself. I am Ackles, and this is the story of how I stopped paying for a life that had already been signed away from under me. My name is Ackles, and I was the daughter who answered the phone. That sentence sounds small, but if you grew up in a family like mine, you know it is the most important sentence about me. I was the one who answered when the water heater died at midnight. I was the one who answered when the property tax letter showed up and nobody could remember if it had been paid. I was the one who answered when my mother cried because the air conditioning had stopped during the worst week of July. I answered, and I fixed it, and I paid for it, and I went back to my own apartment 40 miles away, and I did this for 6 years without saying a word because I believed that being needed was the same thing as being loved. It is not the same thing. I learned that on a Tuesday in October in a quiet hallway with a folded paper in my hand. I had stopped by my parents' house that morning because my mother had asked me to grab a tax document she swore was in the office desk. She was 64 and she said her back hurt too much to bend down to the bottom drawer. My father was watching a baseball game in the den. My mother was on the back porch with her sister. The house was warm and smelled like coffee and the cinnamon candles she lit every fall. I went into the office that used to be my childhood bedroom, the room with the same yellow wallpaper from when I was 9, and I knelt by the desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. The tax document was not there. There was a folder labeled with my brother's name, Connor, in my mother's handwriting. There was a folder labeled House. And underneath both folders, slid flat against the bottom of the drawer like someone had wanted it to stay hidden, there was a thick manila envelope from a title company. I should have closed the drawer. A normal daughter, a daughter who trusted her parents the way I had trusted mine for 32 years, would have closed the drawer and gone to look in the kitchen. But the title company name on that envelope was the same name I had seen on the original closing papers when my parents bought the house back when I was a teenager and they had let me hold the keys for the photograph. Something in my hand recognized that envelope. Something in my hand told me to look, so I looked. The deed was inside and it was new, not a copy. A new deed dated almost 2 years earlier. The seller line had my parents' names. The buyer line had only one name, Connor, my brother, my younger brother who had not paid a bill in this house since he turned 18. My brother whose student loans my father had quietly paid off the year before. My brother who had, 2 summers ago, complained at Thanksgiving that he could never afford property of his own in this city. While I sat at the same table eating my mother's stuffing and saying nothing about the auto pay that came out of my checking account on the first of every month for the mortgage on the chair he was sitting in. The transfer was a quitclaim deed. I knew what that meant because I work in finance. I am 32 years old. I am a senior analyst at a regional firm in the city. I read documents like this for a living. A quitclaim deed meant my parents had signed away their entire interest in the house to Connor with no money changing hands, with no announcement, with no conversation, and they had done it almost 2 years before I knelt down in their drawer to get a tax form. 2 years. 2 years of me paying the mortgage on a house that was, on paper, no longer my parents' to live in. 2 years of me believing I was protecting them. 2 years of being the only person in the family who did not know. I did not slam the drawer, I did not run out of the house, I did not even cry, not yet, because my body did not know what to do with information that big. I sat on the carpet of my old yellow bedroom and I counted the months in my head, 72 payments. I had made 72 mortgage payments since I took over the bills, and at some point during those payments my parents had decided that the house I was paying for did not belong to them anymore, and they had not told me. I refolded the deed exactly the way I had found it. I slid the envelope back under the folders the way I had found it. I closed the drawer. I went to the kitchen and told my mother I could not find the tax form. She said, "Oh, your father must have moved it." She kissed my cheek. She asked me if I could come back next weekend because the dishwasher was making a clicking sound. I said yes. I was still saying yes. The yes was a habit my body had not yet learned to break. I drove home that afternoon with my hands shaking on the wheel, and I want you to understand something about the way I shook. I was not shaking from rage. Rage came later. I was shaking from a kind of grief that does not have a name yet in our language, the grief of finding out that the people you have been holding up were holding a different version of the family in their hands the whole time, a version that did not have you in the center of it. They had drawn a circle, and the circle had Connor inside it, and they had put me on the outside of the circle so quietly that I had not even noticed when the line was drawn. To understand how this happened, you have to understand who I have been my whole life and who Connor has been. I am the older one by 4 years. From the time I was small, I was the steady one. I made my own lunches by 2nd grade. I learned to read early. I did my homework without being asked. My report cards were stacks of grades that my mother kept in a box in the closet. The box was not on the wall. Connor's were. Connor was the boy who came after 3 miscarriages, and my mother had told me the story 100 times when I was a child in a voice soft with miracle. He was the answered prayer. He was the surprise gift. He was the son they had stopped expecting, and I was the daughter who had arrived first on schedule easy. There is a particular kind of love a family gives to the child who is hard to keep. There is a different kind of attention a family gives to the child they almost did not have. I understood this when I was 7 years old, standing at the side of the bathtub watching my mother wash Connor's hair like he was made of something rare. I have understood it every day since. Connor was charming. I want to be honest with you because if I make him sound like a cartoon you will not believe the story, and the story is too important for you not to believe. Connor was funny. Connor had the kind of smile that made waitresses bring extra bread to our table. Connor remembered birthdays in a flashy public way, posting pictures with our parents on social media that always got hundreds of likes from people in town. He was the son who took our father to the baseball games. He was the son who hugged our mother in front of guests. He was also the son who borrowed $3,000 from her in his senior year of college and never paid it back, and the son who totaled 2 cars before he was 25 and let our father quietly handle the insurance both times, and the son who, when our grandmother died, took the watch she had left for me and pawned it before the will was even read. He was a charming hand reaching into other people's pockets, and he had been reaching for as long as I could remember. When my father had his first heart event 8 years ago, I was the one who left the office in the middle of a quarterly review and drove 90 minutes through traffic to sit in the hospital lobby. Connor came the next day with flowers. The flowers got the photograph. My drive did not. After my father came home, his work hours were cut. My mother, who had been a school librarian, had retired the year before because of her knees. The bills started piling on the kitchen counter the way bills do when 2 incomes shrink to 1.5. I came over for dinner one Sunday and my mother started crying over a stack of envelopes, and I said, "Do not worry about it, I will help." I said it the way you say things when you are 26 years old and the world has not yet shown you what those words actually cost. That was the start. I took over the mortgage first, then I took over the property taxes, then the homeowner's insurance, and then the gas bill, and then the electric. I built a spreadsheet. I am a finance person. I cannot help building a spreadsheet about my own life. The spreadsheet had 2 columns. The first column was what I paid. The second column was what my parents paid. By year 4, the second column had a single entry, which was the cable bill, which my father insisted on paying because, in his words, a man should pay for his own tea. Levision, I did not laugh. I should have laughed. I should have taken that small joke seriously. I should have understood in that moment that pride was a thing my father still held on to, even as his daughter quietly carried his entire life on her back, and that the kind of pride that lets a man pay for his television but not his roof is a pride that has decided whose contributions matter. For 6 years I sent the money. The mortgage payment came out of my account by autopay. The other bills I paid with online transfer. I never asked to see a statement. I never asked who the loan was in. I had assumed, the way trusting daughters assume, that it was still in my parents' names because their names had been on it the year I started helping. It had not occurred to me to check. It had not occurred to me to verify. They were my parents. The house was their house. The arrangement was the arrangement. I trusted them. That is the part that hurts to say even now. I trusted them. The week after I found the deed, I did not say a word about it. I did 3 things calmly with the kind of focus I usually save for client work. The first thing I did was call the bank that held the mortgage. I told the customer service representative I was the authorized payer on the account and I needed an updated statement. She asked me security questions. I knew all the answers because for 6 years I had been the person who answered them. I asked her one question. I asked her whose name the loan was in. She paused. She told me the loan had been refinanced almost 2 years ago into the name of one Connor on the title with my parents as cosigners. The refinance had pulled cash out, $28,000 in cash out deposited into a checking account that did not belong to me. I asked her to repeat the number. She repeated it, $28,000. The second thing I did was open my own bank records and pull every mortgage payment I had made since the date of the refinance. There were 23 of them, paid by autopay on time every month. They totaled almost $42,000. I had paid $42,000 on a mortgage that was now in my brother's name. The third thing I did was sit at my kitchen counter, drink an entire glass of water without putting it down, and write out a list of every other thing I had paid for in the last 2 years. The list ran for 2 pages. New appliances, a water heater, a roof patch, the taxes, 2 of my mother's cataract surgeries, a cruise my father had wanted for their 40th anniversary, which I had paid for and pretended was a gift from both of them so my father would feel like the trip was his idea. I read the list twice, then I closed the notebook. Then I cried for a long time, not loudly, not the way you cry in movies, but the way you cry when you finally understand that a story you were telling yourself for years was not the same story other people were telling about you. I did not tell anyone for a week. I needed to think. I am the kind of woman who thinks before she speaks, and I knew that if I spoke too early, my family would have time to write a script. They would have time to align their stories. They would have time to call Connor and tell him to act surprised. I did not want to give them that time. I wanted to see what happened next on its own without my help, so I waited. I went to work. I answered my mother's calls about the dishwasher and a strange smell in the basement, and I said I was busy that weekend. I had never said I was busy. The first time I said it, my mother went silent, the way a person goes silent when an instrument that always plays for them has gone out of tune. She said, "Are you all right?" I said I was fine. I was not fine, I was thinking. On the 8th day, my brother called me. Connor never called me. Connor texted when he wanted something in that breezy way younger siblings text older sisters when they need a favor. A phone call from Connor was an event. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. He sounded warm. He said he had been thinking about me. He said he wanted to grab a coffee, just the 2 of us, like old times. We did not have old times. Connor and I had never grabbed a coffee in our entire adult lives. I knew immediately that someone had told him to call. I asked him what was going on. He laughed and said, "Can a brother not call his sister?" I said, "Sure, Connor." I said, "Where do you want to meet?" We met 2 days later at a place near my office. He came in wearing a new jacket. He had a new watch. He looked tan, which was strange because it was the middle of October. I sat across from him and waited. Connor told me he had a great opportunity. He used those exact words, a great opportunity. He had a friend who was a developer, a friend who had been looking for properties in the older neighborhoods, the ones that were starting to get bought up by young families with money. Connor said the family house, our family house, the house I had been paying for, was sitting on a lot that was, in his words, finally worth something. The friend had offered him a serious number. Connor did not say the number out loud, but he said it would set our parents up for a long time. He said it would set him up too. He said it as if those 2 things were the same thing. He said he had been thinking about how to make this work for everyone, and he had decided in his generosity that he would give Mom and Dad a small place near the river when the deal closed, somewhere they could be comfortable, and he wanted to know if I would help him talk them into it. I did not blink, I did not nod, I let him keep talking. Connor leaned in like a salesman. He said, "Listen, I know Mom and Dad get sentimental. They will not want to move at first, but they cannot stay there forever. The house is too big for them. The neighborhood is changing. This is the right move." He said it like he was pitching a stranger. I said, "Connor, who owns the house?" He smiled at me. He had a beautiful smile. He said, "Technically, I do." They wanted to make sure it stayed in the family. I said, "Technically." He said, "Well, fully, I own it fully. Mom and Dad transferred it a couple years back. It was simpler that way. For taxes." He waved his hand when he said taxes, the way men wave their hands when they want a woman to stop asking questions. I asked him one more question. I asked him if I had paid the mortgage that month. He looked at me for a second too long. He said, yeah, you did. Thanks for that, by the way. I never said it enough." I said, "No problem." I said, "I have to get back to work." I left the coffee on the table. He had not paid for it. I do not think he had planned to. I drove home and I parked in my own driveway and I sat in the car and I laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh you laugh when a story finally clicks into place and you realize you have been the punchline of it for longer than you knew. The plan was so obvious now. My parents had transferred the house to Connor 2 years ago because Connor had a developer friend, because Connor had a plan, because Connor had a future, and they wanted to give that future to him. They had let me keep paying because in their minds I was the responsible one and I would always pay. And as long as I paid, the asset would grow. And the asset would grow in their golden boy's name, and when the time came to sell, the money would lift Connor up. They had used my paychecks to fertilize my brother's inheritance. And then when the moment came to harvest, they planned to move our parents into a smaller place by the river so my brother and his developer friend could split the difference. I want to tell you something that I have learned about families. The cruelest thing a family can do to a daughter is not to take from her. The cruelest thing is to take from her while telling her it is love. My mother had kissed my cheek every Sunday for 6 years. My father had told me in the exact words that I was the strong one of the family. They had said these things while signing a deed that left me out of every page. They had said these things while planning a future that did not include me. They had said these things while sleeping at night under a roof I was paying for, in a house that did not belong to them anymore, on land that was about to be sold so their son could buy himself a different life. I went inside my apartment and I sat down at my desk and I started a new spreadsheet. The first column was every payment I had made on that mortgage since the refinance, with the date, the amount, and the bank confirmation number. The second column was every other expense I had covered for the house in the same window. The third column was a running total. The total was $68,400. I printed 3 copies. I put 2 in a folder in my filing cabinet. I put 1 in a sealed envelope and mailed it to myself, certified so it would arrive postmarked and untouched. I am a finance person. I know how to build a paper trail. I do not lose at paper. The next Sunday, my mother called and asked me to come to dinner. She had not called all week. The silence had unsettled her. I could hear it in her voice. I said yes. I said I would bring dessert. I bought a pie. I drove the 90 minutes. I did not tell my hands to stop shaking because by then they had stopped on their own. I had moved past shaking. I had arrived at clarity, which is a quieter feeling than people understand. When I walked in, the whole family was there, not just my parents. Connor was there with his wife Brielle, and Brielle had brought their 2 kids, and my mother's sister Aunt Patris was there, and even my father's older brother Uncle Wendell, who lived an hour away and only came for holidays. The dining room table was set with the good plates, the ones with the gold rim that my mother only used for special occasions. The candles were lit. The roast was on a platter. They were waiting for me. I stood in the doorway with my pie in my hands, and I understood that this was not a Sunday dinner. This was an ambush. They had assembled a jury, and the jury was the family, and the trial was for me, and the verdict had been written before I knocked on the door. My mother smiled and took the pie from me. She said, "Sweetheart, sit down. We have something we want to talk about." I sat. I am 32 years old, and even at 32, when my mother tells me to sit, my body sits. I want you to understand that because I think a lot of women understand it. I sat and I waited. My father cleared his throat. He had practiced this. I could tell because my father is not a man who clears his throat for casual sentences. He said, "Ackles, your mother and I have been thinking. Connor has been talking to us about the house, about what makes sense for our future." He said the words "our future," and he glanced at Connor while he said them, and Connor sat there with that smile, the same one from the coffee shop. My father said, "The truth is, this house is too much for us now. The stairs, the yard, the taxes. We have decided to let Connor handle the next chapter for us. He has a buyer. The buyer is willing to pay a good price. We will move into something smaller, something easier. Connor will take care of all of it. We just need the family to be on the same page." I did not speak. I let him keep going. He had a speech, and a speech wants to be heard. My mother jumped in then. She said, "Sweetheart, we know you have been so generous with the bills. We know how much you have helped, and we want you to know that we are so grateful. So grateful, but Connor has a vision for this. He has connections. He has the kind of mind for this that, well, you have always been good with numbers, but Connor sees the bigger picture. Connor sees the long game." She said it like a compliment. She said it like she was giving me a flower. I sat there in the chair with the cushion my grandmother had embroidered when I was a baby, in the dining room I had paid the property taxes on for 6 years, and I listened to my own mother tell me that my brother saw the long game. Aunt Patris nodded. Uncle Wendell nodded. Brielle put her hand on Connor's arm in a way that said, "You are doing so well, my husband." The kids ate their bread. Connor leaned forward and said, "Sis, look, I know this is a big change. I know you have feelings about this house, but you have to trust me. I have a plan that takes care of everyone. Mom and Dad will be safe. You will get a thank you. We will all come out ahead." "A thank you?" He said the word thank you. I want you to imagine being told at your own family dinner by your charming brother that your reward for paying the mortgage on your parents' home for 6 years was going to be a thank you. I have replayed that moment in my head 1,000 times. I have replayed it because it was the moment my old life ended and my new life began. The version of me who was going to keep being the dependable one, the version who was going to keep her head down and write checks and be the steady one of the family, that version of me died in that chair with the candles flickering, with my mother's hopeful eyes on my face. I smiled. I want you to know that I smiled. I smiled because I had been trained my whole life to make peace at this table, and the body remembers training even when the mind has moved on. I said, "That is interesting." I said it slowly. I said, "Can I ask a few questions before we agree to anything?" Connor said, "Of course, sis, ask anything." He thought he had won. He was already mentally spending the money. I asked the first question. "Mom, when did the deed transfer to Connor?" My mother's face changed. She had not expected the question. She had expected gratitude. She had expected hesitation maybe, or sentiment or worry, but not a question with a date attached. She looked at my father. My father looked at his plate. Connor jumped in and said, "That was a tax thing, sis. We did it a couple years back. It does not change anything for the family." I said, "Connor, I am asking Mom." My mother said, well, it was almost 2 years ago, maybe a little more. I said, was I told? My father said, we did not want to bother you with the paperwork, sweetheart. You are so busy with work. I said, I am asking if I was told. The room went quiet. The kids felt it before the adults did. The kids stopped chewing. Brielle pulled her phone out. Aunt Patris looked at her napkin. Uncle Wendell coughed. My mother's eyes filled. She said, no, we did not tell you. We thought it would be easier. I said, easier for who? My father straightened up. My father has a voice he uses when he wants to remind the table that he is the head of it. He used that voice now. He said, Ackles, this is our family business. Your mother and I made a decision about our property. We did not have to ask P. Permission from our daughter. I said, Dad, I have paid the mortgage on this house for 72 months. He blinked. He did not have a sentence ready for that one. He said, and we have always appreciated that. I said, did you appreciate it the day you signed the house over to Connor? Connor stood up. He said, okay, this is getting hostile. We are trying to have a family conversation and you are coming in with attitude. Sit down, Connor, I said. I did not raise my voice. I said it the way you say it to a dog who has been bad. He sat. He sat because he has spent his whole life being told he is special. And when a person who has spent her whole life being told she is reasonable suddenly speaks like she is the one in charge, the person who has been special always sits, the first time, out of pure shock. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a folder. The folder had 3 copies of the spreadsheet inside it. I had thought about whether to bring it. I had thought about it for 3 days. I had decided that I would not bring it unless they tried to ambush me, and the moment I had walked in and seen the gold-rimmed plates, I had known I was going to use it. I slid the first copy across the table to my father. I slid the second copy to my mother. I slid the third copy down the table to Connor. They read. The room was so quiet I could hear the candle wicks burning. I said, Dad, this is every dollar I have paid into this house since the day you signed it over to Connor. I said, Mom, this includes your cataract surgeries, the cruise, the roof, the taxes. I said, Connor, this is what your inheritance has cost me. I said you wanted to talk about a thank you. $68,400 is not a thank you. $68,400 is a debt. My father exploded. I had expected that. He said I was disrespectful. He said I was making this about money. He said in front of the children that I had always had a hard side, that he had hoped I would soften with age, that he was disappointed. My mother cried. Connor said I was trying to ruin a family dinner. Brielle whispered something to the kids and started gathering their things. Aunt Patris said, oh, sweetheart, this is not the time. I sat in my chair and I let it all happen. I let the storm crash into the room. I had nothing more to say in that moment because I had already said the only thing that mattered, which was a number on a page with confirmation codes. When the noise died down, I said one more sentence. I said, I will not pay the mortgage anymore. The autopay stops on the 1st. I am giving you written notice tonight on this table in front of witnesses. Whatever you decide to do about the house, you will decide without my money in it. I said it without anger. I said it the way I would have read a clause to a client. I said it because after 32 years of being told I was the strong one, I had finally figured out what strong was supposed to look like. Strong was not paying for a future that did not have you in it. Strong was closing the bank. I left dinner without eating. I left my pie on the counter. I drove home. I went inside. I logged into my bank. I canceled the auto pay. The screen asked me if I was sure. I clicked yes. The screen asked me to give a reason. I clicked other. The system did not need my reason. The system did not love me or owe me. The system processed the cancellation in 2 seconds. 6 years of automatic giving stopped on a Sunday night in my socks at my kitchen counter with no one watching. The next morning my phone had 11 missed calls, 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, 1 from Aunt Patris, 5 from Connor. I did not answer any of them. I went to work. I had a quarterly meeting. I gave my presentation. I closed 3 accounts that week. I worked the way grieving people sometimes work, because work was a place where my numbers were respected for what they were. The first text from my mother came on Monday afternoon. It was long. It was the kind of long text mothers write when they want to lay out a case. She said she had not slept. She said my father was not himself. She said I had embarrassed the family in front of company. She said Connor had only ever wanted to help. She said the spreadsheet had been hurtful. She said I should think about how the family would heal. She did not apologize. The word sorry did not appear. The word hurtful was used about my paper. I did not respond. I did not respond for 2 days. On the 3rd day I wrote back. I wrote one sentence. I wrote, the auto pay is off. Please make arrangements. I sent it. I closed my phone. I did not open it again that night. The first late notice from the bank arrived at my parents' house 10 days later. I know this because Aunt Patris called me, agitated, and told me. She said my mother was crying. She said my father was furious. She said Connor had not been answering his phone. I said, Aunt Patris, this is a family matter. R between mom and dad and Connor. Connor owns the house. He owes the mortgage. I said it kindly. I said it the way you say something kind to a person who is on the wrong side of a line you have just drawn. She was quiet for a long time. She said, "Sweetheart, you do not really mean to let it go to default." I said, "The loan is in Connor's name, Aunt Patris." She said, "But they live there." I said, "I know." She said, "You're going to let your parents lose their home." I said, "I am going to let Connor decide whether his parents lose their home. There is a difference." She did not answer. She hung up. The next 2 weeks were the hardest 2 weeks of my adult life. I want to be honest about that because if I tell you it was easy, I will not be telling you the truth, and the truth is the only thing I have left. My phone buzzed all day. My mother left voicemails. My father left voicemails. Connor sent me long texts that switched, sometimes inside the same paragraph, between charm and threats. He told me he loved me, and he told me I was crazy. He told me I was tearing apart the family, and he told me I had always been jealous of him. The jealous line was a new one. I had never been jealous of Connor. I had been many things in relation to Connor, but jealous was not on the list. Jealousy is what you feel when you want what someone else has. I had never wanted what Connor had. I had only wanted my parents to see what I had given. The second late notice came 2 weeks after the first. The third came after that. The bank started calling Connor. I knew this because I called the bank myself in my role as an authorized payer who had now stopped paying and confirmed that the property was in default and that the legal owner had been notified. The bank representative thanked me for keeping them informed of changes in the family financial situation. She used those words, the family financial situation, like it was a polite way to talk about the slow-motion crash of my parents' life as I had stopped catching it. In the third week, Connor showed up at my apartment. He had never been to my apartment in the 4 years I had lived there. He banged on the door. He had been drinking. I could smell it through the door before I opened it. I opened it because I do not run from my brother, but I also did not invite him in. I stood in the doorway. He stood in the hall. He was thinner than I remembered. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had spent a couple of weeks being shouted at by people who used to call him special. He said, "What do you want?" He said it like a businessman in a movie. I said, "Connor, you came to me." He said, "What do you want from me?" I said, "I want nothing from you." He said, "Then start paying again." I said, "No." He said, "This is my house, Ackles." I said, "Yes, it is." He said, "You cannot just stop." I said, "Watch me." He stood there. He was breathing hard. He said, "The buyer is going to walk." I said, "That sounds like your problem." He said, "Mom and Dad will lose the house." I said, "Did Mom and Dad know that you were planning to put them in a small place by the river?" He froze. He had not expected that sentence. He said, "Who told you about the river?" I said, "You did, over coffee. You said the words yourself." He said, "I never said river." I said, "You said somewhere they could be comfortable." I have a memory, Connor. I have a memory, and I have a notebook, and I have the text you sent me last week where you called me crazy in the second paragraph and asked me to help you in the fifth. He took a step back. He said, "You are going to ruin everything." I said, "No, I am going to stop fixing everything. There is a difference, Connor. You may have to learn it for the first time in your life." I closed the door. I locked it. I sat on my couch and I shook for a few minutes, and then I drank a glass of water and I went to bed. I did not sleep, but I did not cry either. I had passed the crying stage. The fourth week, my mother came to my office. My mother had never been to my office. She did not know how to find it. She had taken a cab. The receptionist called my desk and said, "Your mother is in the lobby." I went down. My mother was wearing her good coat, the camel one she wore to weddings and funerals. Her makeup was wrong. She had cried in the cab. She saw me and her face fell. She said, "Sweetheart, please." I said, "Mom, this is not where we should talk." She said, "I know, I am sorry. I just had to come. I just had to see you." I took her to a coffee shop 2 blocks down. I bought her a tea. She held it like it was warm and she was cold. She did not drink it. She looked at me and she said, "Your father had to call Connor to ask him what to do about the heat. He has never had to call his son about the heat. He used to call you. He does not know how to call Connor for things he does not feel like himself." I waited. My mother's voice cracked. She said, "Ackles, I did not know what we were really signing. I am going to tell you that even if you do not believe me, your father said it was a tax thing. Connor said it was a tax thing. They had a man come to the house with papers, a man Connor knew, and he said it was just to keep it in the family, just to make things easier later, just so the state could not take it. I did not understand. I signed because your father signed. I have always signed because your father signed. I did not know there was a refinance. I did not know there was money taken out. I did not know any of that until you sat at my dinner table and put a piece of paper in my hand." She started crying. She cried the way an older woman cries, quietly with her shoulders down. She said, "I have not slept since that night. I have not eaten right. I keep thinking about every Sunday you came over. I keep thinking about how I asked you for the tax form. I keep thinking about every time I said you were strong, like it was a compliment, like I was not actually saying you can take more." I did not say anything for a long time. My mother had never spoken to me like this. She was speaking to me like a woman, not like a daughter. I let her cry. I drank my coffee. I waited. When she could speak again, she said, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Mom, I want you to read every paper Connor has ever put in front of you. I want you to call a lawyer of your own, not Connor's friend, not the man with the papers, your own lawyer, a stranger, someone who works for you. I want you to look at the actual deed. I want you to look at the actual loan documents. I want you to know what you signed. I want you to find out what Connor took out in cash and what he did with it. I want you to find out what his plan really is, because his plan is not to take care of you. His plan is to sell the house and put you in a smaller place by the river, and he was hoping I would help him talk you into it." She put her hand over her mouth. She said no. She said no, Connor would not. I said, "Mom." He sat across from me at a coffee shop. He said the words, "I am not making this up." She said, "Oh," she said it small. She said it the way a person says something when they are watching a wall they had been leaning against turn into a curtain. She said, "I cannot ask you for help anymore." I said, "You can ask. I will tell you what I am willing to do and what I am not. But before you ask, you have to look. You have to know what you are asking inside. Because I have spent 6 years giving without knowing what I was giving to, and I will not do that again, not even for you, not even for Dad. I love you. But love that does not have eyes is just a habit, and I cannot afford the habit anymore." She nodded. She did not argue with me. She did not call me hard. She did not say the family thing, the thing about how a family stays together, the thing she had always said. She just nodded. She finished her tea. She let me put her in a cab. She kissed my hand before she got in. My mother had never kissed my hand before. She kissed it like I was someone she had met as an adult and was learning to know. A week later, my mother called a lawyer. I want to skip ahead because the legal details are not the point of this story, but I will tell you what mattered. The lawyer was a woman named Ms. Hadley who worked out of a small office in a city 40 minutes from my parents' town. My mother chose her because she was nobody Connor knew and because her receptionist had been kind on the phone. Ms. Hadley spent 2 weeks reviewing every document. She found the original deed transfer. She found the refinance. She found the cash out. She found the email chain which had been forwarded to my mother and which my mother had never read because it had a subject line that said tax planning. And my mother trusted my father and my father trusted Connor. And the email chain had 3 messages between Connor and his developer friend that talked about the property by name and used the words easy flip and family pressure handled. Ms. Hadley printed the chain. She sat my parents down in her office, the two of them on a small couch, and she walked them through it line by line. My mother told me later that my father had not spoken for an hour after that meeting. He had sat in the car in the parking lot with his hands on the steering wheel and not started the engine. My mother had sat in the passenger seat. They had not looked at each other. Eventually my father had started the engine and driven home. He had gone into the den. He had not turned on the television. My mother had brought him a sandwich. He had not eaten it. That night my father called me. My father had not called me in 3 weeks. His voice on the phone was thinner than I had ever heard it. He said, "Ackles, it is your father," as if I might not know. He said, "I do not know how to say what I need to say. So I am going to say the wrong words and you will have to forgive me for that." I let him talk. He said, "I thought I was protecting our family. I thought I was being smart. I thought your brother had a head for things I did not understand, and I thought you would be fine because you were always fine. I thought wrong. I thought wrong about a lot. I am an old man calling his daughter to tell her that her father was wrong. I do not know what else to say." I did not say it was okay. I did not say I forgave him. I said, "Dad, thank you for calling me." I said that took something. I said, "We will talk soon." I said it with kindness, but I did not lie to him. I am done lying to my parents to make them feel better about how they treated me. I love them, but I will not perform comfort for them. They will have to sit in the discomfort they made. That is part of how people change. The next event was the family meeting. Ms. Hadley called it. She said it was not a legal proceeding, but it was a structured conversation and she would moderate it. My parents would be there. Connor would be there. I would be there. Brielle was invited but did not come. Connor came late. He came in a suit. Connor wore a suit to a meeting in a small office in a strip mall because Connor wears a costume to every fight he thinks he can win. Ms. Hadley sat at the head of the table. She had a folder. She opened it. She said, "Before anyone speaks, I am going to lay out the facts as I have confirmed them, and then we will talk." She read out the facts: the deed transfer date, the refinance date, the cash out amount. The disposition of the cash out, which she had traced through requests for records, $28,000 wired into a brokerage account in Connor's name, of which approximately $19,000 had been spent on a vehicle and the remainder on a vacation rental down payment that had not closed. She read out the email chain with the developer. She read out the buyer's draft offer, which had been emailed to Connor 3 months earlier, naming a sale price of $440,000. She read out the proposed downsized property, the place by the river, which was a 2-bedroom condominium in a complex an hour from any of my mother's friends, and which had been priced at $170,000. She read out the math. After the mortgage payoff and the buyer's commission, Connor stood to net somewhere between $170,000 and $190,000 from the sale. The condominium for our parents, paid in full, would consume about half of that. The rest Connor would keep. She read it the way an accountant reads a bill. She did not editorialize. She did not raise her voice. The numbers did not need her to raise her voice, they raised it themselves. When she stopped, my father said, "That is the first time anyone has shown me those numbers in one place." Connor said, "This is biased. This is biased information. None of this is final. You are taking it out of context." Ms. Hadley looked at him. She said, "Sir, I am presenting documents you signed and emails you wrote. There is no context. There is only what is on the page." He went red. He went red the way a man goes red when he realizes a story he has been telling has lost the floor. He started to push his chair back. My mother said, "Sit down, Connor." My mother, the woman who had washed his hair like a miracle. She said it with the same voice she had used in the dining room when she had told me to sit down 1,000 times. He sat. My mother said, "I want to know one thing." She looked at him. She said, "When you put us in that condo by the river and you took the rest of the money and we were an hour away from everyone we knew, were you ever going to pay the property taxes for us? Were you ever going to fix our boiler? Were you ever going to come when you got the call?" He did not answer. He looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He looked at the door. My mother said, "Look at me. Were you going to be there for us the way your sister has been there for us? Not at Christmas, not in pictures." There, he could not look at her. He started to say, "Mom," and she said, "No, no, Connor, I am asking you to be honest in this room in front of this lawyer, in front of your sister for 1 minute. Were you going to take care of us or were you going to call her?" He said very quietly, "I do not know." My mother said, "You were going to call her." He did not deny it. He could not. He had been raised on the same air I had been raised on, and on that air the answer to every emergency in our family had always been Ackles, and he knew it the same way the rest of us knew it. He had built his entire plan on the assumption that I would still be the answer when the next emergency came. The plan had assumed me. The plan had needed me. The plan had run on me the way the house had run on my paychecks, and I had finally turned the auto pay off, and now the plan was sitting in a strip mall office, in a suit it had borrowed from a man it was pretending to be. Ms. Hadley let the silence do the work. She is good at her job. She did not rue. She said, "All right, now we talk about options." She presented options the way a doctor presents treatments. Option 1, Connor sold the house as planned and walked away with the proceeds. After refunding to me the documented $68,400 I had paid into the property since the transfer, plus reasonable interest, and after putting our parents in housing of their actual choice, fully paid with a maintenance reserve, and after agreeing in writing to a series of consequences if he did not live up to those terms. Option 2, Connor signed the property back to our parents, undoing the transfer, and our parents with their own counsel decided what they wanted to do with their home, and Connor reimbursed me out of any future estate proceeds. Option 3, the family went to court and the court would decide, and the court would do so with all of these documents and evidence, and the family name would do whatever a family name does in a courthouse hallway. Connor's face during option 3 was the face of a man counting out loud. I watched him calculate. I watched him understand for the first time in his life that he could not charm his way out of this room. There was no waitress in this room. There was no extra bread. There was a folder with his signature on every other page. He chose option 2. He chose it because Ms. Hadley let him choose, and because my mother was looking at him like she had not looked at him since he was a teenager, and because my father had not said a word for 40 minutes, and because I think somewhere underneath the costume there was still a piece of my brother who knew that he had done something he could not undo with a smile. He signed the papers. The deed went back to my parents. The refinance was their problem to manage, but Ms. Hadley negotiated a payment plan with the bank that they could meet on their reduced income with the help of a small stipend from Connor's own paycheck garnished in writing every month for 4 years. Connor did not get to keep the car. The car was sold. The money he had used as a down payment on the failed vacation rental was clawed back through the brokerage. Most of the cash out came home. He did not pay me back. I want to be honest about that. The reimbursement was supposed to come out of his future earnings in small monthly amounts, and a year later he had paid me about $3,000 of the $68,000. I do not believe I will ever see most of that money again. I have made peace with it. The money was the language I needed at the dinner table that night to make my family hear me, but the money was not the point. The point was the auto pay. The point was the no. 6 months after the meeting at Ms. Hadley's office, my mother invited me to lunch. It was not Sunday dinner. It was a Wednesday. She had taken the bus into the city to meet me in a place near my office. She came alone. She brought a small box. The box was not wrapped. Inside the box was a key. The key was the original key to the front door of the house I had grown up in. She had written a small note on a card in her handwriting, the handwriting that had labeled the folders in the drawer. The card said, "You are welcome here, but you do not owe this house anything anymore." I read it twice. I cried in the restaurant. My mother let me cry. She did not pat my arm. She did not say it was going to be all right. She just sat across from me with her hands folded, and she let me cry, and then she ordered soup. We ate soup together. We did not talk about Connor. We talked about her sister. We talked about a movie my mother had watched. We talked about the news. It was the first lunch in my life I had eaten with my mother in which I was not also, in some quiet part of my mind, calculating who was paying for what and what I would be expected to do next. I was just a daughter eating soup with her mother, and the soup was warm, and the bill, when it came, I let her pay. I want to tell you about my father because the story would not be complete without him. My father did not call again for a long time. My father is the kind of man who does not know how to be wrong out loud. He showed it instead. He came to my apartment 6 months after the meeting with a toolbox. He did not call first. He just rang my buzzer on a Saturday morning. He said, "I noticed your light on the porch was out the last time you came home for dinner. I brought a bulb." He fixed the bulb. He fixed two other things while he was there. He did not ask permission. He did not stay for coffee. He hugged me at the door. He said, "Your mother and I are eating at 6 if you can make it." He left. He came back the next month with another toolbox and he fixed something else. This is how my father apologizes. I have decided to let him. There are sons who never learn to say I was wrong, and there are fathers who never learn to say it, and sometimes the thing you accept is a hand on a porch light. End. Sometimes that is enough, sometimes it is not. I am still deciding which one this is, but I am letting him show up. I am letting him try. Connor and I do not talk much. I see him at family events. I am cordial. I am not warm. He is, I have noticed, smaller now, not physically. He is the same height, the same weight, but the room around him is smaller. He does not take up the air the way he used to. The family does not laugh at his jokes the same way. Brielle is more guarded with him. The children are growing up watching their father pay garnishments to their grandparents and their aunt every month, and someday when they are old enough they will ask why, and someone will have to tell them, and Connor will have to sit with whatever face they make when they hear it. That is not my problem. That is the price of a deed signed in a drawer. The house is still standing. My parents are still in it. The mortgage is being paid, partly by their reduced income, partly by Connor's garnishment, partly by some money my mother had been quietly setting aside for years that nobody, not even my father, had known about. She had put it away in a small account in her own name, just in case, the way women of her generation sometimes do, knowing somewhere in their bones that a husband and a son might one day need to be balanced out by a private envelope. I asked her once how much was in it. She said enough. She did not say a number. I did not push. I think she had earned the right to keep one number to herself. I still go to Sunday dinner sometimes. Not every week. I go when I want to. I bring a pie when I want to. When I do not want to, I do not go. The first month I missed 2 Sundays, my mother did not call to guilt me. She sent me a text that said, "Miss you, eat well." That was the entire text. That text rebuilt something between us that I did not know could be rebuilt. A mother who lets her daughter not show up is a mother learning to love her daughter for who she is, not for what she does. It took us 32 years to get there. We got there. That counts. I want to end with the part of the story that is about me, because every story I have ever told has ended up being about somebody else, and I want to end this one differently. After the meeting, after the deed went back, after the lunch with the soup, I sat in my apartment one night and I added up the money I had not been spending on my parents' house. The mortgage, the bills, the surgeries, the roof, the cruise, the cataracts. I took the number, the running monthly number that used to leave my account, and I redirected it. Some of it I put into a retirement account that I had been neglecting for years. Some of it I put into a savings goal I had abandoned a long time ago, a goal that had been sitting in a notebook in my desk for almost a decade, with the words "down payment" written at the top of the page in my own handwriting. A year and a half after the dinner with the gold-rimmed plates, I bought my own house. It was small. It was on a street with old trees. It had a yellow door. I painted the door myself. I did not invite anyone to help. My father, when he heard, drove 90 minutes with a toolbox and offered to fix my mailbox, which was leaning. I let him. He did not stay long. He hugged me on the porch. He said, "This is yours." I said, "Yes, Dad, it is." He nodded. He said, "Good." He drove home. I sat on my own porch that night, on my own steps in my own house, with my own deed in a folder in my own desk in my own office. And I thought about the woman who had knelt by another desk almost 2 years earlier and pulled an envelope out from under 2 folders. I thought about her hands. I thought about how they had not known yet what they were holding. I thought about how she had refolded the deed and gone to the kitchen and lied about a tax form to her mother. I thought about how that woman had been about to tell herself one more time that being needed was the same as being loved. It is not the same. It will never be the same. Love that asked you to sign without reading is not love. It is paperwork dressed up like dinner. The strongest thing I ever did was not the spreadsheet. The strongest thing I ever did was the auto pay. The strongest thing I ever did was the click of one button on a Sunday night in my socks at my kitchen counter while my family thought I was still the daughter who would always come back and pay. I'm still that daughter in some ways. I still pick up the phone, I still bring pies, I still drive 90 minutes. But I drive in the direction I choose and I bring what I choose and I leave when I choose, and the house I sleep in at the end of every visit has my name on the deed in clean block letters in a drawer that nobody opens but me. That is the story. That is what happened when my parents secretly signed their house over to my golden boy brother. They thought they were giving Connor a future. What they were really doing was teaching their Tao. GH'd her that her future belonged to her and that the only signature that would ever matter was her own. If you have ever been the dependable one in your family, the one who answers the phone, the one who quietly pays, the one who never asks for credit because you were raised to believe that asking would make the love go away, I want you to do one thing for me before you close this video. I want you to write in the comments the moment you knew the love in your family was conditional and what you did with that knowing. Maybe you spoke up, maybe you stayed quiet, maybe you are still deciding. There is no wrong answer, only your answer. I am Ackles and I read what you write, and I will be here next time with another story, because the one thing I have learned after the deed and the dinner and the auto pay and the yellow door is that the daughters who used to be invisible find each other in places like this. And once we find each other, we are not invisible anymore.